This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and each week I'll be chatting with some amazing hikers from across the United States and abroad. Spring has finally arrived in the Pacific Northwest, and soon I'll be hitting the trails to record short-form episodes with hikers I meet along the way. Look out for those episodes to drop sometime in June for Season 3. In the meantime, we'll be asking some of your favorite hikers about their experiences and adventures. We always finish the episode off with a round of this or that questions all related to hiking. We recorded this week's episode prior to our guest starting his PCT journey in April of 2023. His name is Riley, and you can follow him on Instagram at riley.seeholzer. I had such a fun time chatting with Riley on this episode. We speak about what it's like hiking in and around northern Utah, an unexpected wildlife encounter, and his upcoming journey on the Pacific Crest Trail. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Riley. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm here with Riley, Utah hiker that's going to be going on an amazing journey here in a couple weeks. By the time you listen to this, he'll probably be on the PCT. Thanks, Riley, for joining us on today's podcast. For listeners that haven't had a chance to follow you yet, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you got started hiking?
Yeah, I've probably been a what you could call an outdoorsman basically my whole life. I grew up in Utah, really close to the Idaho border, actually, like pretty far north, and live in a valley called Cache Valley that's surrounded by mountains. Growing up in the Boy Scouts, I had a lot of experience just being outside, causing mayhem, and being unsupervised, and that just kind of led into more adventures in life where you're just outside all the time. And I like being outside. But I think some of the key things that really got me to enjoy backpacking and being outdoors was when I was a teenager. I had a couple of really good scout leaders who would take us on some backpacking trips and other adventures, and they were crazy. Sometimes you'd go backpacking and it would snow in August, and I remember one specific trip where it snowed and everybody was wet and terribly soaked in August, and it snowed, but we had so much fun. I'll never forget that. I think I was probably 14 years old, and we went on a lot of scout camp trips up to the Yellowstone and the Teton National Park region, and that was fun. I don't really remember a ton of the things we did. I just remember hiking and being in the mountains, and I like to be in the mountains and I like to be outside. And as I got older, my family also is pretty adventurous, and we would go on trips. And I think it was in 2018, we went on a trip as a family to Yosemite National Park, and we backpacked from Glacier Point to the campsite below Half Dome. And then the next day we went to Half Dome and came back and backpacked back down the Mist Trail all the way down to Yosemite Valley. And that was a very key trip, because after that I just wanted to backpack more, and that was 5 years ago. And now I just incorporated backpacking into my life. I also have a hunting background, and I basically hunted for I probably got into hunting when I was about 14, 15 years old. I didn't start to take it seriously until I was 20, and I incorporated backpacking and hunting into one activity, and I started to, go way into the wilderness areas, backpack in with all my hunting and my backpacking equipment. And that's how I learned to really get good at backpacking, because it's heavy. You got your hunting equipment and your backpacking equipment. So like minimum base weight's probably 25 to 30 pounds rather than 15 pounds. Yeah. And the more I did that, the more I wanted to just backpack and hunt and backpack hunt. And so now I'm doing the PCT this year. It was a continuation of all those activities that got me to where I'm at now.
No, it definitely seemed like it's all progressed to this point of you going on the PCT from backpacking and hiking as a Boy Scout. And then I imagine with hunting, you're probably doing like multi-day trips to reach, whether it's your elk camp just to get there, and then having to haul stuff in and out. Got you ready to where you're at right now.
You definitely push the limits of your physical capabilities on some of those backcountry hunts. You're planning on coming out heavier than you went in because you were successful in harvesting an animal. And so it taught me a lot of just prioritizing what gear is necessary and not necessary, but also having what you need. And you go in there with 30 pounds, and usually typically about a 5-mile hike is where I'll start, and then I'll just move around as needed. I like to hunt mule deer the most. Okay. But I also have hunted other animals. But the difference, I think, between just backpacking in general and hunting is backpacking, you're traveling through an environment and you're enjoying the environment by traveling through it. Hunting, you're becoming part of the ecosystem almost, because now you're a predator. And not only are you enjoying the views, you're learning all of the terrain features and how the animals use that area to live in order for you to be a successful hunter. And so I really became aware of how to read a map and how to navigate off trail because of hunting. Yeah. And now I feel very comfortable. If I'm on a trail, it's almost like you don't even need to think about where you're going. You still do to a certain extent, but I have the ability to travel off trail, and I like to be off trail too. So
nice. And you mentioned that you're based in northern Utah, close to the Idaho border. What's it like hiking in that region? Because that's a very unique region where it's high desert, but you still get some forest, and the mountains are still big. What's it like hiking in your neck of the woods?
In my specific area, there's a mountain range called the Bear River Mountain Range. Part of it is a wilderness area, and part of it is a national forest. It's not overly popular, but it definitely gets enough use that the trails are well marked and well used. They're not really necessarily marked, but they're just easy to follow. And that's where I probably spent most of my nights backpacking, is in that mountain range. It's about, 40 miles long from where I live up to the border of Idaho, and then it extends into Idaho for quite a few miles. But I've backpacked all along that mountain range many times. It's a beautiful place because you're up on top of the mountain, and when you get to the very top, you can actually see the city below off of the east side of the mountain range, or the west side of the mountain range, that is. And so you have phone service and you can see the city, but then you walk back and you're in the middle of the mountains where you can't see anything that's man-made within about 100-yard walk from the top. And it's a unique place. Wow. And I love it a lot. And one other thing that's nice about living here is I'm about a 5-hour drive to southern Utah, and I'm about a 5-hour drive to the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho, about a 5-hour drive to the Wind River Range, and a 3-hour drive to the Uinta Mountain Wilderness and Mountain Range. And so not only can I backpack a lot within about 20 minutes of where I live, I'm not a very far drive from some very unique areas.
You're centrally located. Like, basically you can choose a direction and you can be there by midday if you leave early enough. Utah is known for its beautiful national parks. Out of all the national parks Utah has, do you have a favorite one that you like to visit?
They're all very similar in the fact that they're all red rock areas. I think I like Bryce Canyon or Capitol Reef the best because they're a little less popular than Arches and Zion. And Canyonlands I haven't really been to. I've been to once or twice, but we only have gone to like the overlook areas. I would like to hike more in Canyonlands, but I would have to say that my favorite national park in Utah is probably Bryce Canyon. Okay. It's really unique. It's not very big. There's a lot of really fun trails, and it's so beautiful. And it does get busy, but it is less busy than Zion and Arches. So that's probably why I like it more.
Gotcha. One thing that I like to highlight is national parks definitely get the crowds, get the attention, because they do have some of the grander sights and sounds, but there's some really great state parks, national monuments, and national forests in different states that are equally as impressive, but without the crowds. Is there a national forest, state park, or national monument that really calls to you and you enjoy visiting frequently?
Uinta Mountains, that's my playground. It's one of the only mountain ranges in the United States that runs east to west. It's a really unique mountain range from basically everything else around it. The mountains are red. They have like a reddish hue to them. And the highest peak in Utah is there. I think there's 13,000 foot mountains there. And the tallest mountain there is Kings Peak that I've summited twice. I summited it with my sisters last summer. That place is probably my favorite place to backpack and hike in Utah because it's a perfect backpacking location because it's not a crazy steep mountain range. It's a very gradual from the parking lot up to the top it's a lot of elevation gain, but it's over 10 to 12 miles to the top. And there's lots of water there and it's so beautiful. And it gets a decent amount of traffic, but definitely way less than the national parks because you have to hike 10 miles to even get into where the mountains are. So,
oh, yeah, I don't think I can recall a mountain range that I've been on that runs east to west. That's very unique because everything, at least here on the West Coast, it's north and south.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's so beautiful there. That's my favorite place in Utah.
And the fact that it's red mountains instead of your typical jagged rocks or forested land like it is here on the Pacific Northwest makes it really unique. I'll have to add that to the show notes.
As long as nobody goes, they can look up pictures. They just can't go there.
Yeah, got to keep the crowds down, right?
Oh, yeah.
So one thing that comes into your feed a few times that I wanted to ask you about is some wind caves or some tunnels that you've been able to hike to and explore. Is there a favorite cave or tunnel system that you visited and explored there in Utah or just in the United States?
I think those specific ones you're talking about are called the wind caves. It's probably the most popular hike in the area that I'm from. It's not very far. It's like 1.5 miles. And they're caves that are actually formed from the wind blowing over millions of years. I only go hike that trail in the winter time or when the weather's bad, because if you go when the weather's good, it's so overcrowded. So I like to hike it in the winter with my micro spikes, and I rarely see people, but the trail will get packed down enough still that you can hike it without snowshoes. As far as other caves, the region I'm in does have a lot of cave systems, but they require a lot of rappelling and canyoneering experience to go into. So I haven't really done much of them. And in the caving community, it's kind of hush hush. You don't really talk about like what happens in the cave stays in the cave. I have found some of the openings of the caves just by researching them and looking at maps and then navigating off trail to find them. But I don't go into them because usually it's a straight down drop off to them.
Oh, wow.
So I just find them. I do like to find caves. I don't tell people where they are because I don't want to cause problems with the caving community. I also want to get into that caving community somehow. So I have to be a good steward of the caves. So, but there is some popular caves that are public. In southern Idaho, there's a place called Minnetonka Cave that I'm not exactly sure how long it is, but it's a full on. They've got stairs and walkways and lights in it. And I think it's about 1 mile deep. And I'm not sure if it's closed down anymore because I haven't been in about 10 years. And the last time I drove by, it had a sign that said it was closed. I'm not sure if it's closed because they're restoring the pathway or the lights in it or any other reason. But I definitely do enjoy going in those caves. It's a really unique experience.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned early on that you've been backpacking and hiking since a kid, but it's really seemed to have captured your sense of adventure over the last couple of years exclusively. Is there a favorite backpacking trip that you've done in the last couple of years that maybe it's one that you go to every year or one that just sticks out in your mind?
Last year, actually, in preparation for the Pacific Crest Trail, I mapped out my own route through the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho. There's a route there called the Grand Sawtooth Loop, and it's about 75 miles. And I wanted to go on 100 or more mile hike to prepare. So I basically hiked that Sawtooth Loop, but I added a few extra lakes and another little loop to it and made it 100. It ended up being 113 miles, and I did it over 5 days, 6 nights.
Wow.
And it was very cool because the way I mapped it out is I started and ended at one point. So it was a loop. So I just parked my vehicle.
Nice.
But about 4 days in, I I hiked past the Redfish Lodge area, which is like a resort type of vibe, and it has restaurants and cabins and all that. And it's really popular there.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the mountain range is popular, but yeah, it's a wilderness area. So no vehicles. You have to hike into it. And so in order to practice for the PCT, I hiked about 80 miles and then got to that Redfish Lodge area and resupplied at the general store. And I stealth camped outside of the lodge. And then I hiked the other 30 miles back to my vehicle.
Wow.
And that was a very memorable trip because I did it solo. It was for 6 days, actually, 5 days, 6 nights.
Wow.
And that really solidified the fact that I think I'll enjoy the PCT.
Do you remember what season you did it? Was there still snow on some of the peaks?
I did it in August of 2022, and I think I hiked through about 100 yards of snow on the whole time. And then last year, it wasn't really a heavy snow year, and I did it the first week of August, and there was a lot of bugs.
Yeah.
It was definitely a lot of mosquitoes, but it was beautiful. That mountain range is wonderful. So
yeah, I haven't had a chance to visit, but I had a buddy that grew up in that area, and he had some great photos, and it just looks otherworldly with the spires and the rock columns that protrude out of the mountain range. It's something else.
Yeah, there's a reason it's called the Sawtooth Mountains, because it looks like every single time you turn around, there's a mountain range that looks like a saw sticking straight up out of the ground.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
One thing I noticed, Riley, and correct me if I'm wrong, but over the last couple of years have really extended your hiking season into the winter months by snowshoeing. And you made some really spectacular summits where I'm like, oh, I don't even think like for me, it wouldn't have been easy in the summer without snow. Can't imagine how more grueling it was snowshoeing up to the summits. But how has it been incorporating snowshoeing into your hiking background, and what kind of tips or advice would you have for folks that are interested in getting into snowshoeing?
The reason why I wanted to get out more in the winter is because in Utah, the winters are long and cold, and I started needing to be outside all the time just to be happy, especially in the winter. It's tough.
Yeah.
So I got some snowshoes about 4 years ago. I really just started trying to go to the same places that I would go in the summer, as long as the avalanche danger was minimal. And it's interesting to say this, being from Utah, but I don't really ski, and skiing hasn't really been part of my life at all. I have been a few times, but I definitely am not good at skiing, and I don't feel comfortable skiing in the backcountry. So I got the snowshoes, and it's not much different from the summer as far as walking. It's harder to walk for sure, but you just get on and start walking. And once you get the hang of the snowshoes, it's no big deal. But definitely, if you're wanting to get into snowshoeing, I would start just on some terrain that's not very steep to start with. I would recommend buying, if you want, I bought some really nice, expensive snowshoes to start because I knew I was just going to do it. And I'm glad I did. I bought some MSR Mountain Ascent snowshoes, and they've lasted 4 years, and nothing's broken on them. And I probably hike at least 100 miles on them every winter. As far as summiting mountains, I don't summit the ones that have really, really steep approaches. I don't summit ones that have a lot of rocky, craggy stuff. The mountain there's two mountains that I'll summit in the winter. One's called Bird New Peak. It's about a 10-minute drive to the trailhead from my house, and it's an 11-mile hike round trip. And it's not like an extremely steep hike. It's just constant up. And then once you get onto the ridge, you just hike the ridge all the way to the top of the mountain. And that's a good mountain to climb as long as the avalanche danger is low. And I always check on the avalanche forecast website to make sure that there isn't bad avalanche danger. Yeah. And as long as you're aware of avalanche danger, and as long as you are prepared to deal with the cold weather, I think anybody could go and start snowshoeing as long as you have a hiking background. There's more things to be aware of, but you don't need to be overly concerned as long as you know how to deal with the snow.
Nice. Those are good tips, because for me, I've never snowshoed until this season, and I did a guided tour that's right next to one of our ski resorts. And like you said, it was pretty much flat. There was a few hills that we had to climb, but nothing strenuous. And I was surprised how easy the learning curve was, because it is kind of like hiking. And the following day after I did that guided tour, I went to Costco, got my first pair of snowshoes. Trying to find places like that where it's not a steep incline, it's just more gradual to reach some of those summits, I think is going to be key in continuing hiking into the winter months.
Yeah, I don't even always try to summit, and usually I usually only summit that mountain once a winter. I haven't been able to do it this year because of there's too much snow, and every time I have time to go, the avalanche danger is more than I'm comfortable with, so I don't.
Okay.
But I still get out and just go to other places that aren't very steep.
Yeah.
So
another place that's growing in popularity there in southern Utah is the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. You've been doing some trips down there. I mean, there's so much to see in that area, but is there a memorable site that you've enjoyed coming across?
Yeah, Escalante is, in my opinion, it's like the most rugged and wild place in Utah because, I don't know, there's just some allure about it because it's not a national park. It's a national monument, and it's such a big, vast area. You could really get into trouble out there if you aren't prepared. So there's a road called Hole in the Rock Road that goes from the town of Escalante clear down to Lake Powell, and this place called Hole in the Rock where the Mormon pioneers way back in the 1800s literally carved out and made this channel through the Red Rock so that they could cross the Colorado River to get from, I think, Moab area up into the other end of Utah. And I've drove down there once, and it's like a 50 some odd mile road, and you absolutely have to have 4-wheel drive, a high clearance vehicle, and it's going to rock your brains out. It is the worst road on planet Earth. I've been there one time and I will never go back, but I am glad I went there because it was cool. And it's cool to see the history of that place that just like 200 years ago, people were coming out here with covered wagons and hand carts. And it's just insane that they were able to survive because it's so remote nowadays, let alone way back then. So on that road, there's a lot of really cool scenic attractions. You know, most of them are a little hike that will take you a half a day, but there's one place called Coyote Gulch, which is a tributary to the Escalante River system. It's pretty popular. There's multiple ways to get into the gulch. My preferred way is you park at this water tank and you hike about 2 miles, and then you have to hand line down the sandstone to get to the bottom of the gulch. When you're hiking to it, it looks like you're on the surface of Mars because it's red rocks and hoodoos and all of these really cool rock formations the whole way there. But then you drop down into this gulch and there's a little creek. It's probably about a foot deep at the max, so you can walk right through it, and it's about 10 to 20 feet across if you go in the springtime when it's still flowing. And it's just a beautiful place. You can backpack in there. That place, you really got to leave no trace there, even more than anywhere else, because it's an isolated ecosystem where it's sheer 100-foot walls on both sides. It's only about 200 feet across at any given point. And so you have to have wag bags for taking a poop and all that. Just take care of the place. Yeah. And every time I go there, it's a little more dirty than I wish it was, but I make sure that I keep track of my own waste and pack out all my trash, and I try to take some with me when I leave just so that I can take care of the place because it's so beautiful and it's a delicate area. Yeah. But every time I go there, there's whole families down in there with their kids, and it's just on the edge of like this really intimidating place, but it's just, you can do it with your family as long as you're prepared and know what you're doing. So,
and Riley, is that Coyote Gulch, is that one where like if you're gonna through hike from end to end, there's no really escape route besides the entry points? Is that right?
Yeah, there's one way I think you can hike in from Hurricane Wash. It's about a 6-mile hike through the high desert, and then you kind of just meander into the canyon. There's an area where you can squeeze through a really thin rock, and I think I've never gone that way before, but I've read about it, that you kind of have to shimmy down and get in. And then there's the way I go, the water tank way, I guess, that you don't really, well, there's always a rope there and it's not a sheer drop off. It's probably like a 45-degree ascent or descent and ascent out and in. And you could probably do it without a rope, but I always use a rope. And other than that, I guess you'd have to rock climb out of there until you got to the end. So okay. Yeah, you're in there. Once you're in there, you really have to be aware of where you're at and know your surroundings, or else you could probably get into a sticky situation. So,
oh, yeah, good to know. And that kind of brings me up to my next question. And it's something that I noticed more recently in your feed, but you've also been doing some canyoneering. How has that experience been? And do you think it's one of those activities that you'll add to your hiking season and add it to your repertoire?
Oh, yeah. First of all, thank thank you to Brandy and Jamie and Rollin and all my canyoneering friends. It is something that I see myself pursuing for sure. It's so fun. And it's a very different activity from what I've done. Yet I'm in the same type of landscapes, but I'm able to enjoy it in a different way. I've only been on 2 canyoneering trips. The first trip I did was a 250-foot rappel, and they just threw me right into the fire. They're like, if you can handle this 250-foot rappel, you can handle anything. And it was pretty nerve-wracking. I'd never rappelled before, and off I go off this giant cliff. You have a harness and a tension device called a critter, and the rope goes through, and you just wrap it around all the little. It looks like a little head, like a little guy, I guess. Has like a circle where you put the rope through, and has 4 arms sticking out. It literally looks like a person. And it's a tension device that hooks to your harness, and the rope goes through, and you just, shimmy down the rope. And I did it. I think I was really nervous the first 100 feet going down. I didn't say anything. And then I finally got to the point where it's like, well, I guess I have to trust this rope, and I'm hanging off of this overhang. I'm 100 feet in the air at least. And I decided this was the coolest thing I'd ever done. And I just yelled like, this is so cool. And they were clapping and yelling at me, and I made it to the bottom, and the adrenaline rush that was going through me was intense. And I was like, that is awesome. And immediately after that, we had to hike down about a half mile to another 100-foot rappel. And I went off that. It was so fun. And then I've been on one other trip with them since. And whenever I go, because I'm the newbie, I'm like, I'll carry the rope. I'll carry all your gear, because I just want to come with you, like whatever it takes for you to invite me next time. And so I'm really, it is a very fun activity, and it requires a lot of knowledge that I don't have, that I'm excited to learn. And it's so cool.
Nice.
Canyoneering is a completely different beast than backpacking and hiking.
Yeah. And Riley, on those rappels, were you still in contact with the rock face, or were you kind of just out there dangling, slowly rappelling down?
You're hooked onto your tension device, and you walk backwards off, and you get to a point where you can't touch the rock anymore because it's a complete overhang, and you just push off and let it go, and then you just rappel down, and you're completely overhanging. I think I was about 50 feet from the rock in front of me at one point, and you're out there just hanging. I'll have to send you a picture. Yeah. You're just hanging out there. Yeah.
How was it doing that push off to get off the rock face and then just be exposed?
It was cool. I just told myself, you know what? You weren't the first one down. There was 4 or 5 other people that went before you, and there's 2 or 3 other people behind you. You're not going to fall. And I just did it, and I didn't let myself overthink it. I just did it. And once I started going and I got comfortable, it turned from a scary experience to a very, very fun experience. Yeah. Really quickly.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I've never done canyoneering, but a couple of years ago, my buddy who does rock climbing, we did a waterfall rappel. There's this gorgeous, almost 100-foot waterfall in my neck of the woods, and there's a great tree that we were able to anchor into. But it took me 2 tries to push off, because you get like maybe 20 feet of the rock face where you're kind of stepping off, and then the last 70 feet you're just exposed next to this waterfall. And the first time I psyched myself out, had to go back up, recollect myself, and then try it again. And then, like you said, once you're exposed and out there, it's something else. And I think canyoneering just helps you explore sections of regions that aren't really accessible hiking, that only are accessible through canyoneering. So that's really awesome.
Sure. Especially in southern Utah, where there's so much micro terrain and so many slot canyons, and it's just a wild place. That the trails and then even the off-trail stuff you can do, you're limited to certain routes. Whereas canyoneering, let's hike to the top of that cliff all the way around, and then we're just going to come straight down it, and then we're right there at the car. It's such a cool activity.
Oh, right on. Riley, you mentioned this earlier on, but your hiking and backpacking trips, you've done solo stuff, but the great thing that I liked about your feed is that you also incorporate your family. You go on hikes with your sisters, your parents. How has it been incorporating your younger siblings into these hiking and backpacking trips? And has there been a memorable trip that you've done in recent years with family?
I value my time with my family greatly. I'm blessed to get along with them really well. I don't take that for granted. I think I used to, but as I get a little older, I realize that it is kind of rare to be able to have this connection with every single person in my family. So I don't take it for granted. As far as my sisters, they're both younger than me. My one sister lives in a van. She's pretty crazy. I think that's awesome though. I'm jealous. And then my other sister, she's still in high school, and they both really love to be outside, and we enjoy each other's company. We went to Capitol Reef last month trying to get some hikes without snow, but there was too much snow, but it was just fun to be around each other. But I think the most memorable trip I've done with just my two sisters is, I mentioned earlier that we went to Kings Peak, the tallest mountain in Utah, together. I mapped out a 40-mile loop hike, and we summited Kings Peak right before noon one day, and it was so cool that I was up there with my sisters on the tallest mountain in Utah, and we were on a 2-day, or I guess it was a 3-day 2-night backpacking trip together. And I was so proud of them because it's a hard hike. It's a 13,000 foot mountain. It's about, I don't know, we were probably 20 miles into our hike by the time we got to the top of it, and we still had 20 more miles to go to finish. And I was happy that they made it, and they got a little scared. I don't know if they want to do it again because it is a pretty intense hike, but I was just happy that they were there. And as far as like my entire family, my mom, dad, and my little brother, we've gone on a lot of trips together as a family. Not a ton of backpacking trips. We have backpacked in the local mountain range a few times, and those are always really fun. And I'm just grateful that I have a family that we like to be around each other, and we like to try to get outside together. So I don't take it for granted anymore that I have a good family that we're happy together.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say like some of the biggest smiles on your face and on your family faces is when you guys are all together, whether you reach a summit or you're exploring a region. You guys are definitely fully stoked to be there, to be together.
For sure. Yeah. It's a different, like when I go by myself, I get different things out of the activity than I do with my family. And when I go with my family, it builds a relationship with each other that I'll cherish for my whole life.
That's a good way to, like you said, strengthen the bond and just have a good time with your family on the trail. We've been talking about this, and the PCT, I feel like, is probably the crown jewel of through hiking in the United States. Not to say that the Appalachian Trail and the Colorado Trail and some of these other through hikes aren't as grand, but definitely I feel like the PCT is up there on people's list. And you made the announcement that you're doing it this year. Can you share a little bit about this upcoming journey and kind of how it came about?
Yeah, that same trip that we went on to Yosemite in 2018 when we went to Half Dome, I saw a sign for the John Muir Trail, and it said it was about 190 some odd miles to Mount Whitney from where we were. And at that time, I had no concept of these really long trails. I was still just getting into backpacking, and I'd hike smaller trails and local things. And I saw that 190 miles John Muir Trail. What is that? That's crazy. And I remember joking to myself that I want to do that. But when I think, how old was I? I was probably 19 or 8 or 20 at that time. And I was like, there's no way, that's so far. But that feeling and the thought never left me. And when I got home, I remember researching the John Muir Trail. And obviously people do this. And I stumbled across the PCT, but at that time it didn't really cause too big of a spark. I just knew it was there. And the main thing that happened during that trip is I just wanted to backpack more. And that's where I incorporated backpacking into my life and into my hunting trips. And then fast forward a few years, I'm an electrician. And so I work outside a lot, and I work with my hands. And most of the time I'm outside in the winter time where it's cold. And I remember coming home from work in the winter just bummed out and sad and frankly depressed a little bit because it's a hard time. And I didn't have like this big goal. I didn't have something that excited me. And I was watching YouTube videos, and I would watch YouTube videos about DIY and about hiking and hunting and random things just to pass the time. And I stumbled across something that was unique. And I'm sure that a lot of people have seen it. It was Ellen Osborne's It Is the People film of her Pacific Crest Trail hike. And as soon as I watched that, I was like, oh, I remember hearing about the PCT when I went to Yosemite. And I watched that video, and it was powerful. Like, it really called to me. I felt this longing feeling to be on the PCT. And I look back at all the trips that I'd done up until then, and I'm like, oh, I need to get good at backpacking now. Like, I already am into it a little bit, but I need to really kick it in gear because I want to do the PCT. And every single day since then, that was in 2019, 4 years ago. Yeah, 3.5, 4 years ago, around there. I've never stopped thinking about the PCT. And all of my trips, whether it's a hunting trip, whether it's a day hike, whether it's a 2 or a 5-day backpacking trip, in some way that has all prepared me to feel confident to do the Pacific Crest Trail this year. So I got a permit last November for early April, and now there's apocalyptic snow on the PCT, and I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to tackle it as smart and as safe as I can. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to get to Campo. I'm going to go northbound, and I'm just going to take it one day at a time, and all the challenges that come are part of the experience. And I'm just going to do the best I can and try to finish.
Yeah. The journey itself is something that I imagine is going to be really rewarding and fulfilling. And I'll keep in touch, but I'm planning on doing some trail angel work here in Washington, because one popular section that's a good resupply is only about 40 minutes away from the PCT where people cross over. So I'll definitely keep in touch and try to track your progress and maybe link up on that section.
That would be wonderful. I'll make sure that when I get there, we'll stay in touch.
Yeah.
That'll be nice.
Now, Riley, it's kind of a split thing, but a lot of hikers and backpackers, either they have a summit ritual or end of the hike routine that maybe they don't do every single time, but they do it frequently. Maybe it's a favorite snack or meal, some sort of drink, or even just a moment of zen. Do you have a regular custom that you've been doing frequently on your hikes and backpacking trips when you either reach your destination or maybe make it back out?
I'd say it depends on the activity, but if I ever reach a summit where there's a good view, I like to make myself a cup of coffee. But most of the time, lately, I've just been training. So I've been just trying to get as many miles in as I can on my days off of work for the PCT, and I don't do that. But if I ever get up to a summit or a cliff or something that has a nice view, I really like to sit and just enjoy my time there and make a cup of coffee and enjoy that.
I like that. Now, Riley, from when you started backpacking to now you're getting ready for the PCT, how much has your pack list changed over those years? Has there been a significant change?
I think that it's evolved, and it steadily evolves over time. I've gotten to a point now that I have about the same gear list for the last 2 years. I look back at my gear pictures from 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it has changed quite a bit, but also I have a lot of those same pieces of gear that I'll incorporate on occasion depending on the situation. My gear philosophy is to try to balance portability, protection, and comfort. I'm not overly concerned with the overall weight, because if you have all three of those things, you're probably going to have a fairly lightweight pack, but it also can keep you protected in any environment that you might find yourself in. So as long as you have a comfortable setup, to me means that it's comfortable while you're hiking, but also comfortable when you're camping and when you're stopped taking breaks. So I think people try to make like, oh, you have a really lightweight pack, that means it's more comfy. But I disagree. I think that you need to balance the time that you're hiking and the time that you're camping and incorporate that into the comfort. And as long as you have a portable system that's comfortable but also protects you from the environment, you're going to strike a middle ground where you're comfortable walking because it's not too heavy, but you're also not skimping on these things that are vital for protection from the elements and the sun and the cold, etc.
That's a really good philosophy.
Yeah.
I like that.
I honestly have no idea what my pack weighs. I think it weighs less than 15 pounds, but I do know that I put all the gear that I'm going to take on the PCT in the pack, and I can go hike a 3-mile-an-hour pace, and I don't need a lot of breaks. And that's what's most important, is actually carrying it, because I think the difference between 12 and 13 pounds or even 10 pounds is negligible. It might weigh a little less, but I can carry whatever my pack weighs. It's probably about 15. I don't know. It might be 17.
Okay.
But I can carry it for a long time.
When it comes to the pack list, is there a piece of gear that right now you consider your most valuable piece of gear?
It's hard to pinpoint one, because it all kind of works together into a system. And if you just had one, the other ones wouldn't mean as much. But I really do enjoy my backpack a lot. My backpack is a ULA circuit.
Okay.
I love it because it's very comfortable and it can carry everything I want, but they make them in Logan, Utah, which is my hometown.
Oh.
And so I have a pack it's pretty popular pack, but I feel like I'm supporting a local business because they're a mile down the road. And so I think that backpack I'll probably have for a very, very long time. Other things in my pack list might change from time to time, but I think that backpack will remain a staple piece.
And on the flip side, Riley, is there one luxury item that you're taking on the PCT pack list just to kind of, not necessarily essential, but just to provide some comfort or just some ambiance, I guess, to when you're camping? Is there a luxury item that you'll be packing on your trip?
I don't know. I'm going to take one of those hiking umbrellas. I don't know if that's a luxury item. The reason I'm taking it is because I'm a ginger and I get sunburned so bad no matter what. And I don't even know if I consider that a luxury item. It's almost like a necessity when the sun's beating down on you. Yeah. And I've been using that I think I got it last summer and I used it on a handful of trips. And I really enjoyed being under it when it's sunny, but I used it in the rain a few times too. Mm-hmm. I'm not bringing any chairs or any extravagant things because even though I don't really care what my pack weight is, it's a pretty dialed lightweight system with not a lot of unnecessary items. Yeah. And what's in there is comfortable for me. So I have a blow up pad. I might bring one of those Z pads as well. I'm still debating because I like those Z foam pads for taking breaks and also extra protection for my Neo Air X Lite pad, but I don't really feel like it's necessary. And so I might take that. Okay. I'll probably decide the day before I fly out if I'm going to take it. I just can't decide right now.
Okay. So your pack list is pretty dialed in. It's just maybe a piece or two that you're considering adding to it?
I've backpacked enough miles and nights to know what I need and what I don't need. And so it's pretty dialed in system, I feel like.
With hikers, especially if you're putting in miles like you are, I imagine there's been some close calls, whether it's possibly getting lost for a little bit of time, maybe an unexpected wildlife encounter, or maybe just Mother Nature kind of threw you a curveball and caught you by surprise. Have you had any of those experiences over the last couple of years, that one experience that kind of stands out for you?
I have a lot of really cool stories along all those lines. If you want me to choose just one, you might be missing out on a couple good stories, but I'll tell you one. Okay. And if you want another one, you can let me know. A few years back, my sister, the one that lives in a van, she wanted to come hunting with me. And it just so happened to be the last day of hunting season. And I said, well, you have to come with me. Well, it was the day before, she told me. So you have to come with me tomorrow because it's the last day. So she came. Well, we were up in the local mountain range and I was with my friend and his girlfriend, and it was me and my sister. There was 4 of us. And we hiked up, and it was an abnormally warm day for October, and we weren't seeing many deer at all. So we decided we were going to relocate, drive about half an hour up another canyon to where we had put a trail camera on this little water hole. And we hiked up there and got the camera. Basically, we were kind of throwing the towel in because it was so hot, the animals, and we were just having bad luck in general, just finding things. So we're about 1.5 miles from a dirt road that's somewhat popular. We're hiking down, and we get about 200 yards from the road, and it's a really steep shale slope. It's probably a 30-degree slope, and it's the middle of the day, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's 4 of us, and we're all talking because we're going to the truck and we're going to drive somewhere else for the evening hunt. And my friend is in front of me about 10 feet, and then my sister and my friend's girlfriend are behind me, and my friend's like looking down towards the road, and there's trees in between us and the road, and we're about 100 yards from the road is all. And he's like, I see a mountain lion. And right when he said that, I saw the mountain lion, and it was walking sort of towards us, but circling us. It was like it was trying to get our wind to to smell us. And it circled all the way up and around us, about 30 feet away from us, probably, maybe a little further, but close enough to be concerned. And I'm starting to get worried, like this mountain lion looks fairly aggressive. At least it's not scared of us. And it starts to trot around me and my friend up towards my sister's, and it runs straight at my sister and his girlfriend, and we're yelling and screaming and throwing rocks. And right when it's running straight towards them, and then it cuts right towards me and rolls a bunch of that shale down onto my legs. Wow. And runs off into the trees. And this whole time, my heart is just pounding out of my chest because it's a mountain lion, like a full-size adult mountain lion that shouldn't be acting that way, especially when it's the middle of the day. There's 4 of us. We're nearby a dirt road. Like, it gets enough traffic that it's probably used to the cars, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Wow. But it was pretty nerve-wracking. And my sister and Caitlin, I'm pretty sure they were scared out of their mind. They were almost so scared they didn't even know what to do. Yeah. But it ran off the road and we scared it away and everybody was fine, but it was crazy. Yeah. It was so cool. And looking back now, it was really cool. But at the time, it was pretty nervous.
Oh
So
man, no, that's intense, right? We have mountain lions here in our neck of the woods, and I've never seen one. I found prints in the snow. That hike, when I saw prints and I wasn't sure if it was still in the area, made me start carrying bear spray on some of my solo hikes just to have something. But
I don't get too concerned about them. Even after that experience, I'm aware that they're there, but I think that was such a rare and abnormal encounter that it's not a big concern. I mean, I feel like you can scare them away. I as much time as I've spent in that same area, that's the only time I've seen one, but I know that they're around.
yeah,
And I just make sure that you're aware of your surroundings with mountain lions. But I think as long as you know how to like make yourself look big and scary and you're not scared to yell at it and swear at it and throw rocks at it, most of the time I think you're probably fine because they're there. And there's way more of them than you think there are.
yeah.
But there isn't that many times where people get attacked.
Exactly.
So.
And I'm glad that you guys were able to scare it off, and it's a story you guys can tell. Now, you said you might have another story or two on the other topics. Yeah, feel free to share whether you had a close call with Mother Nature or maybe you got lost for a little bit of time.
I think most of my really cool stories, I guess, happen when I'm hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I do have some fun stories from backpacking, but when you're hunting, you're putting yourself into a different situation almost because you're off trail most of the time. And you're actually, like, you might not spend more time outside, but you're becoming more part of the environment than you are when you're backpacking. At least that's the way I kind of see it. And so this last year during hunting season in August, I was with a couple of my friends. We were using archery equipment to hunt for mule deer. And in August, on those big, tall mountain ranges, the thunderstorms will come in pretty quickly, especially if you're not paying attention. Well, me and my friend were sitting up under this tree in the shade because it's a hot, sunny day. And we have our binoculars up on a tripod so they're steady. We're literally studying the mountainside across from the basin that we're sitting on because we're trying to find the mule deer that are bedded in the shade. And so you're really, really focused in on what your binoculars are looking at to study the land so you can find the deer. So we weren't paying attention to what's behind us. And all of a sudden this storm rolls in and we're probably 2 or 3 miles from camp. And we're like, uh-oh, we got to go. And sunny day turns into this crazy thunderstorm within 5 minutes. And we're 2 or 3 miles from where our campsite is in the backcountry where there's no trails. And so we're running along this spine ridge while this storm's rolling in, and you can see the clouds just billowing over the mountains towards us. And we got about a half a mile from camp when the thunder and lightning started. And we're up at above tree line, 9,000, 10,000 feet. And it was like simultaneously there'd be a flash and thunder. Then the rain starts and we're running and we're like, we're not putting our rain gear on. We got to go. And I've got my bow. I've got my backpack. It doesn't have my camp, but it's still fairly heavy with my other hunting gear, probably a 20-pound backpack with my bow. We're just running through this big meadow and we get to the trees. Mind you, the trees are pretty thin because you're way up on the mountain.
Yeah.
And we finally make it back to camp, but it was just an intense experience with the thunder and lightning. Like almost constantly there'd be a flash of lightning and a crack of thunder just right on top of you. And it was so loud that I almost wish I had earplugs.
Oh, man.
But you don't think about that in a moment. Just thinking about it, what happened, you're like, that was crazy. And we get back to camp and, once we got to camp, we felt safer because we were in the trees down a little lower elevation. But that whole thunderstorm, it went around us and right through us. And then an hour later, it was nice and sunny again.
Oh, man.
I've had that happen multiple times. I try to be aware, but they come in so fast sometimes that it's just, you can get stuck in a situation that's not very good if you're not careful.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, man. Yeah, both good stories, man. Now, Riley, for those people that are interested in getting into hiking and backpacking this season, especially with springtime coming right upon us, do you have any advice or tips for first-time hikers and maybe backpackers for them to have a safe and rewarding experience in the outdoors?
Yeah. The first thing is don't be intimidated by people like me who have a lot of experience outside. We go and do crazy stuff. You don't have to start with the crazy stuff. I didn't either. When I was younger, I started pretty slow and worked my way up to where I feel comfortable going almost anywhere. Now, I would say that as long as you have some food and some water and some good shoes, you can probably go hike a pretty easy hike and be just fine. And I would start with that. Just start slow and do your research and don't go too far your first few times and just ease into it. And eventually you'll find that you may like it or you may not like it. But if you do find that you like it, then invest in some pretty good gear, whether you're going to day hike or backpack. Just start slow and ease your way into it. I think that if the springtime is a great time to start, because there's going to be a lot of people out there, because everybody has cabin fever. And as soon as the snow melts, there's going to be a lot of people. So go out there and enjoy the world. Don't go too far to start. Just start slow, get comfortable with where you're at, and you'll be surprised how comfortable you will get being outside after you go a few times.
Oh, those are solid tips, Riley. I think come the springtime, I feel like it's one of the more popular seasons on the trail, just because, like you said, people get cabin fever, and just being out in the outdoors, especially on a nice sunny day, it's going to draw the crowds. And what better way to get out there for the first time and feel comfortable is when other people are doing it. This way you don't feel like you're so isolated in a trail. I guess you feel a little bit more comfortable when there's other people around if it's your first time. I feel like the PCT is the big goal for 2023, but do you have any post PCT goals on the horizon or beyond 2023?
I've kind of put all my eggs in one basket with the PCT. I haven't really thought much about what's coming after. Even like I'm quitting my job in 3 weeks, and I don't even know what I'm going to do for employment when I get back. I do have my job waiting for me if I want it, but I don't even know if I'm going to want it. So as far as outdoor things I want to do, I want to do the PCT. If I don't, for some reason, if I'm not able to finish the PCT this year, I anticipate going as far as I can. But if there's some things out of my control, I'll probably have to come back and do those in 2024. I do think about doing the Triple Crown, the Continental Divide, and the Appalachian Trail, but I don't want to taint my experience on the PCT by thinking about those trails until I finish the PCT. So I want to do those, but I'm not thinking very hard about them until the PCT's done. So
it's definitely something that's going to be on the forefront of your mind for the next 4 to 5 months.
There is a few, like in the Uinta Mountains, there's a trail called the Uinta Highline Trail. It's 105-ish miles from one end of the mountain range to the other. And that one's growing in popularity. And I will probably, when I get done with the PCT, if I have some time, I'm sure I'll be in great shape. I would actually like to do that in a yo-yo, like an out and back. So it's 210 miles. When I get done with the PCT, it's going to be a hard transition into life. So I'm going to have some hikes lined up, but I'm not really thinking too hard about it right now. That's just one that I've thought, it might be cool to yo-yo the Uinta Highline Trail, but we'll see if it even happens. I might be busy doing other things when I get back. So we'll see.
No, we'll definitely be rooting for you when you're on the PCT. You're going to be setting off in April. Do you have a month that you want to be at the northern terminus?
I don't really have a very strict timetable, but I would like to finish the PCT before hunting season starts so I can hunt this year. And that means that I need to get done by about the 10th of September. And I imagine that I will be able to get done before then. And if I don't get done by then, that's fine. I'm not too worried, but I would like to be able to get some hunting in this fall. So I don't think it'll be a problem though. I don't think I'll have to go too fast to get done by then. So
okay. Well, awesome, Riley. Those were it for the regular questions. This next section of the podcast is the this or that questions, where I'm gonna give you 2 hiking related topics. You kind of answer the one that you gravitate towards to the most. So the first one is, do you prefer ascending or descending?
Probably ascending.
And how about waterfalls or summits?
Summits.
Do you prefer switchbacks or straight up?
Straight up, because it's intense and you get there faster.
And do you use trek poles or are you more freehand?
Trekking poles, as long as it's not flat. If it's flat, no trekking poles, but if you're going up or down, trekking poles.
Okay. And for your hiking and backpacking trips, do you fuel up before it or do you fill up after?
Before, during, and after. The trick to hiking fast and far is to always have calories going inside.
There you go. And how about bushwhack or go around?
Depends on the situation, but it's easier to go around for sure.
And do you jump in or do you stay dry?
Stay dry. I melt in the rain like a witch. Or I melt in the water too. I'm not the biggest fan of getting wet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you prefer sunsets or sunrises?
Sunsets.
And spring flowers or fall colors?
Probably fall colors.
Okay. And last one, do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
Don't tag hikes. I used to do it, and I've realized that too many people can figure out where it is, and so now if you want to know, you can ask me and I might tell you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Riley, for joining us on this podcast. Really excited to track your adventures on the PCT over the coming months. But for folks that want to follow you and your journey online, what are the best places they can find you? And you also are going to be doing a special podcast project while you're on the PCT. Can you share a little bit about that as well?
As far as the podcast goes, I felt inspired to record my own interview podcast while I hiked the PCT. It's called To the Trail Podcast, and my goal is to just try to capture the essence of the PCT through the stories of the people that I'm going to be hiking with. So it's going to be a learning curve for me to be able to interview people, but I'm excited to do it. So you can find it on Spotify, To the Trail Podcast. Also, it's on Instagram with the same name. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Riley.Seeholzer is my last name, and that's my Instagram. You'll probably have to put a link in because it's a unique last name. But yeah, I'm excited for the podcast, and I'm excited to do the PCT. So if you want to follow along, great. If not, no big deal to me. I'm going to do it anyways.
No, yeah, but definitely, Riley, we'll put all the links in the episode show notes so people can follow along and listen to the podcast. I'm excited to hear stories from the trail because that's going to be a unique experience interacting with everybody on the PCT. But yeah, I definitely appreciate you coming on, and I'm hoping to link up with you once you make it up here to Washington on the Pacific Crest Trail. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. When I get up to Washington, we'll have to collaborate and do a Hikes and Mics to the Trail podcast or something cool like that.
I like that idea for sure.
But thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks, Riley. Thank you once again to Riley for joining us on this episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. Be sure to follow him on Instagram to keep up with their milestones on the Pacific Crest Trail at Riley.Seeholzer. Also, make sure to check out Riley's own podcast, To the Trail, where he'll explore the people, culture, joys, and hardships of the Pacific Crest Trail in 2023. For all the links mentioned in today's episode, be sure to check out our episode show notes. We'll be putting out new episodes every week throughout the spring. Please be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also, follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketza. Follow him on Instagram at Ketza Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMics10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMics10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.